morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today, we need to take a look at Bronzong. Bronzong is one of the big stories that came around from the Players' Cup this past weekend. We saw that the winning deck, the deck that took down the whole thing, and bearing in mind, right, this was not some quick and easy tournament. We're talking about a tournament where you had to get into the top 256 of your region, or 128 in Oceania. Then fight through a double elimination bracket going from top 256 to top 4. 2 losses and you're out. 256 people had to qualify to enter, and then 4 people were remaining. And then you had to go through a double elimination top 16 with the players who had, quite frankly, really gosh darn earned it. And at the end of all of that, we see a Zacian deck winning, but it doesn't win without Bronzong. I mean, really, one way of looking at this is Bronzong has gone and answered the question, what are metal decks going to do without Metal Frying Pan? Simple. They're going to play Bronzong. Now, Bronzong does have an attack, 3 energy, 70 damage plus confusion, nobody cares. More importantly, it has got an ability that says, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's fire Pokemon. It is completely immune to fire Pokemon. And it is worth pointing out at this stage, we can't turn that ability off. That ability is not being turned off. It's not like in the past where you could play something like a Hex Maniac and then go and get a KO. It's not like you could grab a Garbodor and turn it off. Nope. None of that, ladies and gentlemen. None of that. It's interesting to note that we saw those EVs the other day, like, for instance, the Flareon, which will turn off the abilities of Grass Pokemon. Essentially, they turn off the abilities of Pokemon they're hitting for weakness. But no Metal Pokemon. I know Flareon does hit Metal Pokemon for weakness, but there is no ability here which is turning off the abilities of Metal Pokemon. Maybe if we get one in the future there will be, but as it stands at the moment, there isn't. So we're not turning this ability off. And essentially, you can just put Bronzong in the active and go, if you're only playing Fire Pokemon, I win. And Jack Miller did actually play 2 Center Scorch V Max decks this past weekend in rounds 1 and 2 in the winner's bracket. And in both of those games, the game plan was exactly the same. Get Bronzong out. And then win. Get Bronzong into the active and win. And here's the deal. You don't need to attack with Bronzong. And this is what a lot of people, I think, are missing about Bronzong. You look at it and go, metal, double colorless, 70 damage plus confusion. The attack is alright, but it needs a metal energy, so am I going to play some metal energy in my deck? Or am I going to play Aurora energy, and what's that going to do to my energy count? And the answer is, you don't need to. Both of the Center Scorch V Max decks that Jack beat with Bronzong were not because of attacking. In both games, all Jack did was go, boom, Bronzong in the active, I win. And the reason is, in the Pokemon trading card game, if you're unable to draw a card at the beginning of your turn, you lose the game. So what you do is you just play fewer cards than your opponent, or you have more ways to shuffle your hand into your deck than your opponent. And then your opponent decks out. If you've played 4 cards and your opponent's played 6 cards, as long as they haven't got a lot more ways to fix it than you do, they're going to deck out before you. And then you're going to win. Now, if you want to just play a single metal or Aurora energy, go for it. Because that's the other thing to remember here. You're not going to be on the clock. Bronzong is one of those techs that either it works or it doesn't. If your opponent has an answer to Bronzong, they will bring it out, knock out Bronzong, and you might as well not have played it. If they don't have an answer to Bronzong, they will sit for turn after turn after turn after turn after turn after turn after turn, just drawing and passing or trying to think of a way out of it. So you can have 1 metal energy in your deck, and it can be the very last card in your deck, and you draw your metal energy, play a Marnie, and then start attacking. Marnie stops you decking out. And then you're off and rolling. And this can be a free card tech, although I would argue it should be a 5 or 6 card tech for fairly obvious reasons. What if your opponent has an answer? And if we have a look at what went down at the weekend with these Center Scourge V Max decks, they didn't have an answer. They had Heatran for that lovely GX attack that does 50 for each energy attached to it and lets you move all the energy up with the ability. They had Victini, which was good if your opponent attached lots of energy. 30 damage for each energy attached to both active Pokemon, or for 1 colorless energy attach free fire energy from your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way you like. They played Volcanion, which lets you accelerate free energy from your deck to your bench if you went second on your first turn of the game. Or it can do 110 for 2 energy, just so long as you've got another 2 energy somewhere on the field. Could be onto the same Volcanion, but it doesn't have to be. And that's kind of my point here. Against decks like that, you literally auto-win. Either you play fewer cards than your opponent and they will deck out before you, or if you're really worried, you just really slowly attach energy so you can go ahead and get very slow KOs, just in case you're going to end up running out of time. And that is an important thing. If both players are playing a bunch of Marnie, you could end up, whoever's about to deck out is going to play the Marnie, and you could end up in a game that takes so long that in a tournament it ends up in a draw. So in that situation, you could potentially just attach 1 or 2 energy. Well, you need to attach 3, but play 1 or 2 relevant energy and attack with Bronzong. It is a little bit sad that Ditto Prism Star is rotated, of course, because Ditto Prism Star would allow you to drop this as a proper surprise. And this is a tech where you've got to play properly. So if you bench a Lucario and Melmetal and 2 Zacian, then it really doesn't matter if you get Bronzong out, because your opponent can use boss's orders to take those free KOs and win the game. You've got to make sure you don't put enough KOs on the board, otherwise it all goes very wrong. But as long as you play it properly, you're fine. What you've got to look out for is surprises. Now, at the Players' Cup, they played with open deck lists. That meant you knew what your opponent was playing. So when Jack goes against these Center Scorch decks, he can know that they are not playing anything that can KO a Bronzong, so 1 coming out wins, and he can know that he plays more recovery cards than them, i.e. he can do the maths and know that they will deck out before him, so literally just pass until he wins the game. That's not necessarily going to be the deal in every game, which is why you might want to end up playing a few energy so that you can attack if it comes down to it. The one you've really got to look out for here is Reshiram and Charizard, which I suspect might end up making its way into some of these fire decks now as a Bronzong counter, and it is the one that really comes to mind here. Because for 3 energy, 200 damage, but with 6 energy, you do 300, and it isn't affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. So Double Blaze GX, sure it's for 6 energy, but don't forget Welder will help them get there faster than you would usually expect. Plus they might be playing Victini, Volcanion, etc. And then they can just KO a Bronzong. So if you're just playing a 1-1 Bronzong, and your opponent drops a Reshiram and Charizard, that can be a problem. Having said that, it is a once per game GX attack, so maybe it won't work. The thing is, your opponent can just play a non-fire Pokemon. I mean, something like the Snorlax from Rebel Clash I kinda like. 150 HP is very high, 3 energy, 120 damage, and sure it goes to sleep, but, you gotta flip 2 tails in a row for it not to be awake on your next turn, so it's almost certainly going to wake up. You'll probably be fine. And it probably is going to take something like that. Because if you don't have an answer, you lose. And those Center Scorch decks, maybe if they played a copy of this Snorlax, then they would have been able to take out the Bronzong, and it all would have been fine. Because what's your opponent going to do? If they try and take out Snorlax with a Zacian, you can then take out the Zacian with a Center Scorch. And maybe that, and I'm not saying Snorlax is the only option, I'm just giving it as an example of a colourless Pokemon. And I also like the free energy, because free energy is just Welder, which obviously these fire decks are going to be playing, and then one more energy from your hand, and boom, you're off. It's something fire decks are now going to have to work around, and maybe it's over. Maybe it worked beautifully this weekend, because the Centre Scorch players just were not ready for it, and maybe it will never work again. Maybe fire decks from now on are always going to have an answer. But all that means is that Bronzong has fundamentally changed the way that fire players are building their decks, and that in and of itself is a beautiful thing. I do need to mention before we finish, don't forget that Bronzor's got the ability Evolutionary advantage, so if you go second, your opponent can't have attacked, and you can evolve straight up. If you go first, you have a turn you can't evolve, and then your opponent will have a turn to try and KO Bronzor, but they've got to set up an attacker without using a supporter so that they can use boss's orders, or I suppose hit heads on something like a Pokemon catcher, which is possible, and that is the kind of thing that will lead to you losing the game, but let's just say it's a lot less likely. Could happen. Probably won't. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. The Pokemon that I don't think anyone other than the two Australian chaps who went and made the final were expecting. But I tell you what, very good tech. But now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to know what you think about this and how good you think it is and how relevant it is in future, etc., etc. So go nuts in the comment section. Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at The Wassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCG Radio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.